Joseph was sold as a slave to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver and was brought into Egypt. He was just 17 years old when he was sold by his brothers. The story of how Potiphar's wife tried seducing Joseph is found in Genesis 39. When Joseph was brought down to Egypt, he was taken to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, and he was serving under him. The second verse of the chapter says something about Joseph, Genesis 39:2, "And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian." Joseph's life portrays a life of loyalty and faithfulness to God. The scriptures say even Potiphar, who was a Gentile that did not know God, could see with his physical eye and by the observation that the hand of God was upon Joseph. Joseph was so prosperous and was excellent in what he was given to do that Potiphar found him so faithful and loyal that he made Joseph an overseer over his house, and all he had, he kept it in the hand of Joseph, because he could trust him with his life and his family. Potiphar could leave Joseph unattended and still trust him to act honorably and fulfill his responsibilities. But the same could not be said for Potiphar's wife. This made the Lord show forth his hand upon Joseph and bless the house of Potiphar for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was upon all he had in the house. Genesis 39:5. The main text about this subject starts from Genesis 39:7, Genesis 39:7, "And it came to pass after these things, that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me." Potiphar had a beautiful wife who was bored and carried away by Joseph. I don't know what Joseph's early responsibilities were when he first began working at Potiphar's house, but they may have been intensely physical because Joseph was ripped. Well-built, verse 6 tells us. He was also a good-looking guy, and because of this, Joseph's master's wife notices him and begins to proposition him, without much in the way of subtlety either. Because of the progress that enveloped Joseph, Potiphar's wife was jealous of that and sought to kill his good report in the eyes of her husband. She was already seducing him with words. Potiphar's wife, "Come and lay with me on the bed." And as the days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, Potiphar's wife became very attracted to this Hebrew slave. So attracted that she pursued an adulterous affair with Joseph. Joseph remained strong and refused. He even avoided her to try to prevent confrontations, verse 10. Though Paul wrote many hundreds of years later, Joseph understood the principle of his words in 1 Corinthians 6:18, "Flee sexual immorality." Fleeing sexual temptation is vital when the temptation is in front of you, but it's even better if you flee the situation that can lead to the temptation. Whenever Joseph went to take his bath, Potiphar's wife enters his private room and tried seducing Joseph to sleep with her and have sexual intercourse with him. When we visualize the story, it takes one that has a consciousness from another realm to resist that kind of seduction, because there was no one around them to keep them company. Despite Joseph's refusal, she kept insisting on having sexual intercourse with him. She kept seducing him day after day. If Joseph yielded to her lust and slept with Potiphar's wife, no one would have known. Genesis 39:8 says, "But he refused and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand." Genesis 39:9 says, "There is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept back anything from me, but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Joseph was a grateful person. That is why he said these words. He was a loyal attendant. He knew that a man like Potiphar cannot commit this level of trust to him, and he will throw that just away. Joseph continues in the next verse, "There is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept back anything from me, but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Wow, this was why Joseph resisted Potiphar's wife's seduction. Joseph was aware of the presence of God with him. He lived with the consciousness that God was watching him. That is why he said, "How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Joseph knew long before the law of Moses, the statutes and judgments, was given that sexual immorality is a sin. This seduction of Potiphar's wife did not end for a day, but Joseph did not listen to her either to yield to this great evil or accept it. Anytime he sees her, he flees. It was not easy for him, because the Bible says Joseph was a goodly person, handsome, and favored. Genesis 39:10. Day after day, this kept happening until one day. Genesis 39:11-12. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there were none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand, and fled, and got him out. Potiphar's wife violently wanted to rape Joseph now and spoil his reputation in the eye of her husband. The situation came to a climax when Potiphar's wife cornered Joseph and grabbed him. This time Joseph had to flee. He fled so fast that he left his garment in her hands, verses 11-12. When Potiphar's wives saw that Joseph escaped with his clothes in her hand, thinking Joseph would have gone to report her evil to everyone, the Potiphar's wife called to the men of her house and said to them, saying, See, he has brought in Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. She faked this action because after trying to seduce Joseph again and again and failing to cover up her sins and pull Joseph down in his sins, she keeps his cloak next to her until Potiphar comes home, and she tells him her story. That Hebrew slave guy you brought us came into my room to force himself on me. But fortunately, I screamed, and as soon as I did, he left his cloak beside me and ran. This is how your slave has treated me. After Potiphar heard the story, he was outraged. He took Joseph and had him locked up in the prison where the king's prisoners are kept. She sought to destroy Joseph. Genesis 39:15. Like really, Potiphar's wife said, And she spake unto him accord to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant, which thou hast brought unto us, came in unto me to mock me. Potiphar became furious, having yielded to the words of his wife, as every spouse will, and Joseph was thrown into prison without him being questioned to hear his side of the story. It was written that, And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him, and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. Even though Joseph was wrongfully accused and jailed, God showed Joseph mercy and continued to bless him, verse 21. Joseph was mistreated and wronged, yet he endured his circumstances and continued living honorably, 1 Peter 2:20. Joseph chose to stand in integrity, nevertheless of the circumstances that were against him. Joseph stood for God and showed himself as a witness of God to his generation and passed the test of God to him. It teaches us a lot of lessons, but God still showed up for him in the prison. Genesis 39:21 says, But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Sure, what would have been Potiphar's wife is a joy that she finally succeeded in bringing Joseph in so much in her thinking, not knowing that she was just adding another lift to his feet into destiny, because it was in the prison that he met with the very person that linked him to the king of Egypt at that time. Joseph carried the same behavior he had in his Potiphar's house to the prison. In the prison, he kept serving the keeper of the prison, and that means was what God was delivering him from. The presence of Potiphar's wife. It was this Pharaoh that he met from prison that made him the second in command in the nation, and that is how Joseph was covered for generous fulfillment of the prophecy spoken to him.